I can't win. Just as we start to wrap up our review of Emotiva's XPA HC1 monoblocks, do they surprise us with a shipment of 2 new amps? Mono amps. Well, ring the bell because round 2 is about to start as we review the all-new Emotiva BasX A1 monaural amplifier. The BasX A1 is Emotiva's entry-level mono amplifier that produces 200 watts into 8 ohms and 350 watts into 4. Now, because it is a mono amp, it can only power one speaker at a time, meaning a stereo setup is going to require 2 BasX A1 amplifiers. Now, around back, you're going to find the A1's single line-level RCA style input, as well as a single pair of 5-way binding posts. Throw in some trigger input outputs, a status LED defeat switch, and a removable power cord and master power switch, and that's going to round out the A1's features. Now, Emotiva is one thing if not consistent. The A1 looks no different than any other amplifier in the BasX lineup. The only 2 things that distinguish the A1 from its siblings, at least from the front, is the silkscreen name on its face and the single LED status light resting dead center of the amplifier's display window. This is where I would usually harp on Emotiva's industrial design, but I'm not going to today for 2 reasons. First, the BasX has been designed to a very specific price point, and reusing the same chassis as the rest of the line makes sense. And second, unlike the HC1, the A1's slim profile make it look a little bit more streamlined than its costlier sibling. The setup of the A1 could not be easier. Just connect one amp to your preamp's right preamp out and the other to the left, and then each amp to the corresponding speaker, and boom, you're done. Now, we tested the A1 on a few different loudspeakers, the Sonus Faber Lumina 3s, Polk Audio R700, and wait for it, our custom Klipsch Cornwall 4s. We relied on the Hi-Fi Rose RS150 as both a preamp and music streamer in order to keep the focus solely on the BasX A1. Now, before you go blowing me up in the comments about my pairing an almost $5,000 preamp and streamer to a pair of sub-$500 amplifiers, we did this because the Hi-Fi Rose is just an incredibly neutral, dare I say transparent preamp, which is what you want when trying to deduce any potential changes in an amplifier's sound, speaker to speaker, or when compared to other amps. Obviously, there are less expensive preamps out there. Emotiva even makes a few of them, like the BasX PT1, which should pair well with a pair of A1s. So how does the A1 sound, and is it as good as the XPA HC1 I just raved about? Well, yes and no. Straight away, compared to the HC1, the A1 is not a silent amplifier. There is some audible tweet or hiss present when at idle, though this is speaker dependent. When connected to the hugely efficient Cornwalls, tweet or hiss is audible from a distance of about 2 feet. Admittedly, 102 dB sensitive speaker like the Cornwall is just going to be a torture test for any amp with respect to noise floor, though the Emotiva HC1 and Rotel 1592 Mark II amp are notably quieter, with the Deckware Zen being dead silent. Switching to less sensitive speakers like the Sonus Faber results in far less hiss, and in some setups may not even be noticeable unless you press your ear right up to the tweeter itself, which was the case with the Polk R700. But when it comes to bass, the HC1 is marginally better and more refined when it comes to its bass prowess when tasked with controlling, say, the Cornwall's massive 15-inch woofer. But the differences between the HC1 and the less expensive A1 and its 200 watts of power they're subtle at best. I feel the same when comparing the A1 to the Rotel, but keep in mind a pair of A1 monos will run you well under $1,000, which is half to a third as much compared to the competition I just mentioned. Regardless of the music genre, the A1's bass is taut and detailed. I found kick drums to be incredibly well dampened and immediate, though I felt our costlier amps produced just a bit more extension and control down low, despite our in-room measurements not appearing to reflect this sensation, so it may just be psychoacoustics. I was very surprised by the A1's performance when paired with the Lumina 3 towers. These speakers aren't bass heavy by any means, but when connected to the A1, the bass was incredibly textural and focused. Moving on to the mid-range, there was zero coloration heard with any of our speakers. Throughout the mid-range, I detected zero tonal change as I swapped between amps with one exception, the Deckware Zen, which is a tube-based design. The Zen has just a hint of smoothness when directly compared to the A1, but when compared to the Rotel or HC1, there was just no real appreciable difference in tone with respect to the BasX mid-range performance, regardless of the speaker pairing. Now, both the HC1 and Rotel seem to resolve just a little bit more detail, resulting in a performance that was more focused, but nothing that I would classify as representing a night and day difference. And when it comes to the highs, the A1 is not equal to the HC1, Rotel, or Deckware, but it's not that far off either. Because of the A1's slightly higher noise floor, high frequencies aren't as smooth at the edges, exhibiting just faint traces of grain when listening at above average levels, whereas the costlier amps do not appear to follow this trait. But again, the differences are slight. If you have higher sensitivity speakers like Cornwall's, this will definitely be more noticeable, but the gap in performance between the A1 and say the Rotel narrows when you have more typical loudspeakers like the Sonus Faber. Aside from that, the A1's treble performance, it's very detailed, surprisingly airy and refined for such a budget-focused amplifier. Now, with respect to soundstage and dynamics, specifically soundstage definition and delineation, the A1 is capable of pretty incredible feats. When paired with our Lumina 3s, the A1 was near equal to that of the Rotel when it comes to separation between instruments and performers within the soundstage, especially when focused between the speakers. Even more complex passages retained their detail, with the Rotel and HC1 being just a hair better when the going gets tough. But if you're sensing a theme, the differences, they're not stark. The A1 doesn't match the completely holographic Deckware, but the Deckware also doesn't work on every speaker, whereas the BasX A1 can. So if the Deckware represents a perfect 10 when mated to the right pair of speakers, the BasX A1 is a solid 7.5 across the board, at least in my subjective testing. Dynamically, forget about it. For most users and for most speakers that have a 4 ohm rating or greater and a sensitivity of say 86 dB or higher, the A1 will not disappoint. Crescendos abruptly start and stop with ease, though in terms of sonic contrast, because of the A1's noise floor not being completely without sound, sudden silences may not appear like sonic black holes. But that's just about my only complaint. Because the amp's respectable bass control, lack of overt coloration throughout the mid-range, and surprisingly refined treble, its overall presentation when listening at virtually all volumes is fantastic. At $449 each, I cannot fault the BasX A1's performance. While it is not equal to the costlier XPA HC1 at twice the price, the HC1 doesn't necessarily produce twice the performance. This being an amplifier review, it is important that you keep in mind that if you pair the A1 with a different preamp, maybe one that utilizes tubes, it is possible that you could walk away with a very different experience. But for the most part, I believe customers can expect a relatively neutral presentation overall, with the only caveats being a slight loss of bass extension or weight with some speakers and a very subtle graininess up top when pushed. But that's about it. Now, in terms of comparable options, hopefully it's been clear to you that should you spend more and go with, say, the Rotel or even Emotiva's own XPA HC1, you will achieve better performance here and there. Just know that any differences may not represent a night and day change. When compared to more similarly priced amplifiers like OUTLAW Audio's Model 2220, the A1 is slightly more powerful, but aside from that, these two options are neck and neck, at least on paper. I have not heard the OUTLAW, but on paper and with respect to its price, the two seem very comparable. When it comes to my beloved Crown XLS DriveCore 2 amps, they are obviously a better value in terms of just raw power output, but power aside, the Emotiva is equally neutral in tone, and because of its lower noise floor and more consumer-friendly design, it's going to be a better fit for more users straight up. So wrapping it all up, I'm pretty stoked about Emotiva's new BasX line, and the A1 reviewed here may just be my favorite of the bunch. While I typically shy away from hi-fi clutter, at these prices and given their more traditional footprint, the BasX A1 may get me to change my tune. And I'm saying this especially considering my love of the Hi-Fi Rose, which requires me to now be on the market for a standalone amp or monoblocks. But regardless of my ultimate purchasing decision, I really see no reason not to consider the BasX A1 amplifier if you are looking for more than a taste of that high-end sound, but you may be on a tighter budget. Seriously, the A1 is just highly recommended. So that's it. That is now my take on Emotiva's brand new BasX A1 monoblock. But come on, it's an Emotiva, so what do you think?
Well, like anybody could even focus on anything but the corn walls once you revealed those. I'm sorry, Emotiva. It had to happen to someone.
Yeah.
Sadly, it was you.
Yeah.
We've had those things for a while. It's been one of the better kept secrets in this house. Look, they worked. We're done. No, seriously. I know I typically give Emotiva a hard time when it comes to their design. But you know what? I'm going to give them some props for the BasX line. They're really nice. And in my opinion, they look far more expensive than they're actually priced. At least they aren't charging out the you-know-what. These look a lot like the new Rotel Diamond Anniversary amp that just came out.
Yeah.
I think Emotiva out-Rotel'd Rotel. I can't even believe I'm saying that. But
it was amazing to us when we got the new Rotel, how much I was like, I've seen this before. Where have I seen this product before? Oh, right. Emotiva. But anyway, looks are subjective. I think these are really hard to not love. They just are. I mean, there's not much to really say about amplifiers. They either work or they don't. And when they don't, it's usually either because they're built bad or they're just loaded with distortion and all of this stuff. And that's just not the case here. So, I mean, it's actually kind of hard to make an interesting review of an amplifier sometimes, especially one that's not like tube-based or vintage or things like that. But if you're looking for an amplifier line that either can expand, say, your existing AVR, maybe you bought like an RZ50 or you have a smaller Marantz with some preamp outputs, BasX is great. If you're trying to build a, call it cost no object sounding hi-fi system, but on a budget, I can't vouch for this pairing with the Polk R700s enough. Like, holy cow. I know the Polks aren't super cheap, but at roughly $2,000 a pair, plus say roughly $800 for a pair of BasX A1s, $2,800, throw in your preamp of choice, streamer, and all that stuff. I mean, you're talking about real performance for, I mean, some money, but not.
it's approachable.
Yeah. It's obtainable.
I think that's the one thing that Emotiva does better than just about any other brand is they make products that people can actually aspire to. Yeah. You know, and
I would agree with that.
And they work really well, and they often hold up equally, as well as other very, far more expensive products. And what more can you say than what more can you do than applaud them for that? So.
Exactly. I think honestly, Emotiva's biggest problem now going forward, since the BasX line is newer than the XPA line that they also have, which is obviously more powerful, a little bit larger, a few more features for an amp. The BasX gets you so close now to XPA that I think XPA needs an overhaul. Not that there's anything wrong with XPA. Don't get me wrong with don't misunderstand, but I think it needs an overhaul to differentiate itself more from now what they've been able to do with BasX. Because unless you just need the raw horsepower, I think the vast majority of people can get away with BasX. I really do. So,
I agree.
Anything else?
Nope.
Short and sweet. That is now our review of Emotiva's BasX A1 mono amplifier. Now it's time for you guys to tell us what you thought. Let us know down in the comments. Question of the day, pretty simple. Of all of the BasX amplifiers that either we've had on this channel or that you just know to exist, which one seems right for you and your system? I am curious. If you like this video, please do give it a thumbs up, like, and subscribe. Go ahead and ring that bell so that you're notified when new videos come out. If you use any of the links that Kristi left for you down below, you leave us a thanks, or you become a member of this channel. All three of those ways, those are great ways that you have continued to show your support for this channel and the work that we do here. And both of us thank you very much for that. Follow me on Instagram at Recovering Audiophile, and that is it for us today. So remember, the only person who has to like the sound of your system is you. So happy listening, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you on the next video. Bye.